Hi friends, subscribe my channel and give minimum 1000 likes.
Top 10 Most Beautiful Extinct Animals. 10th one, Pinta Island Tortoise. The Pinta Island tortoise, also known as the Pinta giant tortoise, Ebbington Island tortoise or Ebbington Island giant tortoise. The species was described by Albert Gunther in 1877 after specimens arrived in London. By the end of the 19th century, most of the Pinta Island tortoise had been wiped out due to hunting. By the mid-20th century, the species was assumed to be extinct until a single male was discovered on the island in 1971. Efforts were made to mate the male named Lonesome George with the other species, but no viable eggs resulted. Lonesome George died on 24 June 2012 and the species was believed to have become extinct with his death. In the wild, the Pinta Island species rest about 16 hours a day. Pinta Island tortoises are herbivorous, feeding primarily on greens, grasses, native fruit and cactus pads. They drink large quantities of water which they can then store in their bodies for a long period of time for later use. They can reportedly survive up to 6 months without food or water. For breeding, the tortoises were most active during the hot season, January to May. During the cool season, June to November, female tortoises migrated to nesting zone to lay their eggs. They provide critical ecosystem services by dispersing seeds and by acting as ecological engineers through herbivory and nutrient cycling. The extinction of the Pinta Island tortoise has diminished the functioning of the island ecosystem. 9th one, Great Auk. The great auk is a species of flightless alcid that became extinct in the mid-19th century. It was the only modern species in the genus Penguinus. It is not closely related to the birds now known as penguins, which were discovered later and so named by sailors because of their physical resemblance to the great auk. Great auks walk slowly and sometimes use their wings to help them traverse rough terrain. When they did run, it was awkwardly and with short steps in a straight line. Great auks reacted to noises, but were rarely frightened by the sight of something. They used their bills aggressively both in the dense nesting sites and when threatened or captured by humans. These birds are believed to have had a lifespan of approximately 20 to 25 years. The great auk was generally an excellent swimmer, using its wings to propel itself underwater. While swimming, the head was held up, but the neck was drawn in. This species was capable of banging, veering and turning underwater. The great auk was known to dive to depth of 75 meters and it has been claimed that the species was able to dive to depth of 1 kilometer. To conserve energy, most dives were shallow. It also could hold its breath for 15 minutes longer than a seal. Its ability to dive so deeply reduced competition with other alcid species. On 3rd June 1844, the last two confirmed specimens were killed on L Day of the coast of Iceland, ending the last non-breeding attempt. A record of one great auk in 1852 is considered by some to be the last sighting of a member of this species. 8th one, Japanese Honshu wolf. The Japanese wolf is an extinct subspecies of the grey wolf that was once endemic to the island of Honshu, Shikoku and Kyushu in the Japanese archipelago. It is also known as the Honshu wolf. Its binomial name derives from the Greek Hodos path and Phylax guardian, in reference to Japanese folklore which portrayed wolves as the protectors of travelers. It was one of two subspecies that were once found in the Japanese archipelago, the other being the Hokkaido wolf. The Japanese wolf is considered to be extinct as the last Japanese wolf was captured and killed at Washikaguchi of Higashio Shino village in Honshu Nara Prefecture, Japan on January 23, 1905. Sighting of short-legged dog-like beast proposed to be the Japanese wolf have been claimed since the time of its extinction until the last claim in 1997, but none of these have been verified. In AD 713, the wolf first appeared on record in Kofudoki Itsuban, lost writing on ancient customs. From AD 967, historical records indicated the wolf preference for preying on horse, either wild horses or those in pastures, stables and villages. In 1701, a lord introduced the first wolf bounty, and by 1742, the first professional wolf hunters were using firearms and poison. In 1736, rabies appeared among dogs in eastern Japan, indicating that it had ended from China or Korea, then spread across the nation. Shortly after, it spread to the wolf population, turning some wolf from simple horse predators to man killers that led to organized wolf hunts. Killing wolves became a national policy under the Meiji Restoration, and within one generation, the Japanese wolf was extinct. Some interpretations of the Japanese wolf extinction stress the change in local perception of the animal. Rabies-induced aggression and deforestation of the wolf habitat forced them into conflict with humans, and this led to them being targeted by farmers. Seventh one, Steller's sea cow. Steller's sea cow is an extinct Serenian described by George Wilhelm Steller in 1741. At that time, it was found only around the Commander Islands in the Bering Sea between Alaska and Russia. Some 18th century adults would have reached weight of 8 to 10 tons and length up to 9 meters. Within 27 years of discovery by Europeans, the slow-moving and easily caught mammals was hunted into extinction for its meat, fat and hide. Unlike other Serenians, Steller's sea cow was positively buoyant, meaning that it was unable to submerge completely. It had a very thick outer skin 2.5 cm to prevent injury from sharp rocks and ice, and possibly to prevent unsubmerged skin from drying out. The sea cow's blubber was 8 to 10 cm thick, another adaptation to the frigid climate of the Bering Sea. Its skin was brownish black with white patches on some individuals. It was smooth along its back and rough on its sides, with a crater-like depression most likely caused by parasites. This rough texture led to the animal being nicknamed as bark animal. Hair on its body was sparse, but the inside of the sea cow's flippers were covered in bristles. The forelimbs were roughly 67 cm long and the tail fluke was forked. Steller's sea cow was quickly wiped out by fur traders, seal hunters and others who followed Vitus Bering's route past its habitat to Alaska. It was also hunted to collect its valuable subcutaneous fat. The animal was hunted and used by Ivan Kraslenikov in 1754 and Ivan Korovin in 1762, but Dmitry Bragin in 1772 and others later did not see it. Brand thus concluded that by 1768, 27 years after it had been discovered by Europeans, the species was extinct. In 1887, Stengner estimated that there are been fewer than 1,500 individuals remaining at the time of Steller's discovery. Sixth one, Tasmanian Tiger. The thylacine, now extinct, is one of the largest known carnivorous marsupials, evolving about 4 million years ago. The last known live animal was captured in 1933 in Tasmania. It is commonly known as the Tasmanian tiger because of its striped lower back, or the Tasmanian wolf because of the canid-like characteristics. It was native to Tasmania, New Guinea and the Australian mainland. The thylacine was relatively shy and nocturnal, with the general appearance of a medium to large sized dog, except for its stiff tail and abdominal pouch similar to a kangaroo, and dark transverse stripes that radiated from the top of its back reminiscent of a tiger. The thylacine was a formidable apex predator, though exactly how large its prey animals were is disputed. Because of convergent evolution, it displayed a form and adaptation similar to the tiger and wolf of the northern hemisphere, despite being unrelated. Its closest living relative is either the Tasmanian devil or the numbat. The thylacine was one of only two marsupials to have a pouch in both sexes. The other is the water opossum. The pouch of the male thylacine served as a protective sheath covering the external reproductive organ. Australia lost more than 90% of its larger terrestrial vertebrates by around 40,000 years ago, with the notable exceptions of the kangaroo and the thylacine. The thylacine itself likely neared extinction throughout most of its range in mainland Australia by about 2,000 years ago. Although the thylacine was extinct on mainland Australia, it survived into the 1930s on the island state of Tasmania. At the time of the first European settlement, the heaviest distribution were in the northeast, northwest and north Midland region of the state. They were rarely sighted during this time but slowly began to be credited with numerous attacks on sheep. This led to the establishment of bounty scheme in an attempt to control their numbers. The Van Diemen Lands Company introduced bounties on the thylacine from as early as 1830, and between 1888 and 1909 the Tasmanian government paid 1 per head for dead adult thylacine and 10 shilling for pups. In all, they paid out 2,184 bounties, but it is though that many more thylacine were killed than were claimed for. Its extinction is popularly attributed to this relentless effort by farmers and bounty hunters. Fifth one is moa. Moa were 9 species of now extinct flightless bird endemic to New Zealand. The species reached about 3.6 meter in height with the neck outstretched and weighted about 230 kg, while the smallest, the bush moa, was around the size of a turkey. Estimate of the moa population when Polynesians settled New Zealand in 1,080 vary between 58,000 to 2.5 million. Moa fed on a range of plant species and plant parts including fibrous twigs and leaves taken from low trees and shrubs. Like many other birds, moa swallowed gizzard stones which were retained in their muscular gizzards, providing a grinding action that allowed them to eat coarse plant material. These stones were commonly smooth rounded quartz pebbles, but stones over 110 millimeters long have been found among preserved moa gizzard contents. Before the arrival of human settlers, the moa's only predator was the massive horsed eagle. New Zealand had been isolated for 80 million years and had few predators before human arrival, meaning that not only were its ecosystems extremely vulnerable to perturbation by outside species, but also the native species were ill-equipped to cope with human predators. Polynesians arrived sometimes before 1300, and all moa genera were soon driven to extinction by hunting and to a lesser extent by habitat reduction due to forest clearance. By 1445, all moa had become extinct along with the horsed eagle, which had relied on them for food. Fourth one, quagga. The quagga was a subspecies of plain zebra that lived in South Africa until becoming extinct late in the 19th century. It was long thought to be a distinct species, but early genetic studies have supported it being a subspecies of plain zebra. A more recent study suggested that it was merely the southernmost cline or ecotype of the species. The name was derived from its call, which sounded like quah-ha-ha. The quagga is believed to have been around 8 feet long and 4 feet tall at the shoulder. It was distinguished from other zebras by its limited pattern of primarily brown and white stripes, mainly on the front part of the body. The rear was brown and without stripes and therefore more horse-like. The distribution of stripes varied considerably between individuals. After the Dutch settlement of South Africa began, the quagga was heavily hunted as it competed with domesticated animals for forage. Some were taken to zoos in Europe, but breeding programs were unsuccessful. The last wild population lived in the Orange Free State, and the quagga was extinct in the wild by 1878. The last captive specimen died in Amsterdam on 12th August 1883. Only one quagga was ever photographed alive and only 23 skins are preserved today. In 1984, the quagga was the first extinct animal to have its DNA analyzed, and the Quagga project is trying to recreate the phenotype of hair coat pattern and related characteristics by selectively breeding Burchell zebras. Third one, woolly mammoth. The woolly mammoth is an extinct species of mammoth that lived during the Pleistocene until its extinction in the early Holocene epoch. The woolly mammoth began to diverge from the steppe mammoth about 8 lakh years ago in East Asia. Its closest extant relative is the Asian elephant. Mammoth remain had long been known in Asia before they became known to Europeans in the 17th century. The mammoth was identified as an extinct species of elephant by George Cuvier in 1796. The woolly mammoth was roughly the same size as modern African elephants. Males reach shoulder height between 2.7 to 3.4 meter and weighted up to 6 metric tons. Females reached 2.6 to 2.9 meter in shoulder height and weighted up to 4 metric tons. The woolly mammoth coexisted with early humans who used its bones and tusks for making art, tools and dwellings, and the species was also hunted for food. It disappeared from its mainland range at the end of the Pleistocene 10,000 years ago. Isolated populations surveyed on St. Paul Island until 5,600 years ago and on Wrangel Island until 4,000 years ago. Modern humans coexisted with woolly mammoths during the Upper Paleolithic period when the humans entered Europe from Africa between 30,000 and 40,000 years ago. Before this, Neanderthals had coexisted with the mammoths during the Middle Paleolithic and already used mammoth bones for tool making and building materials. Second one, Irish elk. The Irish elk, also called the giant deer or Irish deer, is an extinct species of deer in the genus Megalosaurus and is one of the largest deer that ever lived. Its range extended across Eurasia during the Pleistocene, from Ireland to Lake Baikal in Siberia. The most recent remains of the species have been carbon dated to about 7,700 years ago in Siberia. The Irish elk stood about 2.1 meter tall at the shoulders and carried the largest antlers of any known deer, a maximum of 3.65 meter from tip to tip and 40 kg in weight, for body size at about 450 to 600 kg and up to 700 kg or more. The Irish elk was the heaviest known cervine all-world deer. Based on the dietary requirement of red deer, a 675 kg lean Irish elk stag would have needed to consume 39 kg of fresh forage daily. Assuming antler growth occurred over a span of 120 days, a stag would have required 1,372 grams of protein daily. Historically, the extinction of the elk has been attributed to the encumbering size of the antlers, a maladaptation making fleeing through forest especially difficult for males while being chased by human hunters, or being too taxing nutritionally when the vegetation makeup shifted. In these scenarios, sexual selection by ducks for stags with large antlers would have contributed to decline. Number 1. Smilodon. Smilodon is one of the most famous prehistoric mammals and the best known saber-toothed cat. Although commonly known as the saber-toothed tiger, it was not closely related to the tiger or other modern cats. Smilodon lived in the Americas during the Pleistocene epoch 10,000 years ago. The genus was named in 1842 based on fossils from Brazil. The generic name means scalpel or two-edged knife combined with tooth. The hundreds of individuals obtained from the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles constitute the largest collection of Smilodon fossils. Smilodon was more robustly built than any extant cat, with particularly well-developed forelimbs and exceptionally long upper canine teeth. Its jaw had a bigger gape than that of modern cats, and its upper canines were slender and fragile, being adapted for precision killing. From South America was the largest species at 220 to 436 kg in weight and 120 cm in height. Smilodon hunted large herbivores such as bison and camels, and it remained successful even when encountering new prey species in South America. Smilodon is thought to have killed its prey by holding it still with its forelimbs and biting it. Smilodon became extinct 10,000 years ago in the Quaternary extinction event. Its extinction has been linked to the decline and extinction of large herbivores, which were replaced by smaller and more agile ones like deer. Hence, Smilodon could have been too specialized at hunting large prey and may have been unable to adapt.